I call for anyone to ask to put someone on trial. We need to have someone put on trial officially. Would anyone like to be a prosecutor?
I don't think we should try him.
Yes, speak.
I formally propose that we place Socrates on trial for his actions such as corrupting the youth and disbelieving in gods and generally sort of just putting him on trial.
We have a movement to put Socrates to trial for corrupting the youth and for going against the state religion of Athens. So we will now have the prosecutor give his evidence.
And all other prosecutors.
And all the prosecutors, but
Okay, I have something to move. I move that if Socrates is found innocent, everybody who wanted to try him is put on trial for being against free speech.
we'll get there when we get there. Yeah? Have someone else that you want to put on trial today.
I would like to prosecute Agaratus. Do that.
For the reason of...
For supporting the 30, partaking in all their activities, claiming false citizenship, and just being pretty bad non-citizen trying to mess Athens up.
That name was?
Agaratus?
Yeah.
Agaratus present? Is there an Agaratus in the house?
They're not a citizen, so
There is an Agaratus in the house. He's back there in his dark blue sweater.
So it appears that we'll also have Agaratus on trial, so get your defendants. Yes?
I'd like to put Alexandros on trial.
Like put Alexandros! That person's Benjamin. Alexandros, you are...
Yes!
Wait, does being on trial mean I get to speak in my own defense? Well, he's going to talk anyway.
Okay, point of order. Yes, it does. Now remember, if you bring a trial and you get less than 20% of convictions, then you will pay a fine of 1,000 drachmas.
Okay.
So, and also, if you're proposing a trial, you at least should be prepared to come forward and give a prosecuting speech. If no one else, I believe with Socrates we have a fair few people ready to speak against.
Right, so we'll start with the trial of Socrates. So those who'd like to... Yes?
I move to put Thrasybulus on trial for faking his injuries and then using it as a crutch in order
He's healed over time.
My fellow Athenians, at our last assembly, we had heard an interesting argument to allow women the right to vote. Yet this group...
I don't think we stabbed the pig.
That's the word that's moving.
Yet this group chose to vote against that measure. Today I'm here to propose the same measure, but I hope you'll hear the difference in my argument. Last time you voted to deny women the right to vote in the assembly, and I wonder if you gave the proposal the careful consideration that it deserves, as I have. I urge you to consider these questions. First, do you feel you share the same values as your wife? This is an important facet in any successful marriage. Do you trust your wife? While perhaps having a different expertise than you as an intelligent human being, she does run your household. No? Still not convinced? What if I put it to you this way? By giving women the vote, we're giving you an extra vote. And since we will be paying women to appear in the assembly, it's a free vote. Besides, don't we as an assembly make decisions that may have an impact on our wives? By Demeter, I'm sure that my wife Praxagoras and all of your wives would like to share their opinions on the potential of a tribute mission. Let's say the mission succeeds and everyone comes back safe and sound. Great. But what if it fails? Then our wives become widows. The government has no leadership and Athens collapses. Shouldn't we build contingencies into the government now? So, to recap, if you do in fact believe that we should take steps to secure the future of the democracy, and if you believe that your wife is intelligent and she shares your beliefs, then vote to allow women to vote in the assembly.
With or without payment?
Without payment.
Without payment.
Friends and fellow Athenians, today I come before you to lay accusations against one who I believe is to blame for many of our great city's recent troubles. This is someone whose influence can be found on those who have caused some of the greatest pain for Athens. Remember the leader of the 30, Critias. He led the tyranny that ruled over our city until recently when our comrade Thrasybulus helped lead us to victory over the tyrants. Remember too, Alcibiades. Welcome as we do, we also cannot deny the heavy toll that his Sicilian expedition took on our city and the war effort, its failure ensured by his defection to the Spartans and the betrayal of our plans. And now, recall what these two men have in common, their teacher, Socrates. Yes, it is my belief that Socrates is a danger to our great city's stability. But I will not just let you take my word for it. Instead, I shall read you Socrates' own words. To start, Socrates disregards the well-known and respected words of Homer and Hesiod that tell of our history. Indeed, in his formation of a supposed ideal city, he says that they are stories not to be repeated in our state. Not only does this man claim these great tales are not to be led in his ideal state, he claims that Hesiod told the greatest of all lies when he told of the ancient actions of Uranus and Cronus. Who is he to claim to know better? But slandering our respected histories is not enough for Socrates. He further perpetuates his lies of gods, claiming that our greatest god Zeus is not the author of all things, as the many assert, but he is the cause of a few things only. I can only conclude that this man has no respect for our gods and traditions, and has clearly passed his disregard on to the impressionable young men of Athens. Not only does he disrespect our gods and traditions, but his opposition to our great democracy is also clear to the proposed laws we have seen of the Socratics. Wishing citizenship to require a Socratic aptitude test clearly shows they do not wish the participation of the many, as our great city has had for many years. For these reasons stated, I propose that Socrates contribute to the city's current monetary needs through a fine and be exiled from Athens for a term of 3 years, allowing us to rebuild free of his influence upon our citizens.
So my fellow Athenians, we are here today to decide what to do with Socrates. This man has tried to destroy the great democracy with his teaching about the meddling of the state within the affairs of what everyone does. He is trying to cause a disturbance in the order of things by preaching that a man can't be a traitor, legislator, and warrior all in one because this will ruin the state. Socrates claims that only people who are considered well-suited for the Senate may be put up for election, but then this ruins the whole point of the democracy. Socrates wants the democracy run by only those whom he deems fit. He doesn't believe that an ordinary man who spends his life as, say, a cobbler knows enough to run for a government position that would benefit the cobbler himself. He believes that this meddling with one of another, he believes that this meddling of one with another is the ruin of the state. This is an unreasonable request because it is from the democracy that we, the citizens, are given the opportunity to speak. While Socrates may want to take that away from me, I will use my voice given to me by the democracy to second, what's your name? Anytus's proposal that we should convict, however, I add that we should convict Socrates of treason, but his punishment cannot be death because death will only perpetuate evil and it grants him martyrdom when he only deserves humiliation.
My fellow Athenians, I'm Critobolus, son of Crito, who I know really loves Socrates, but I've got some issues with him. Socrates bases his character claims off of the fact that he is not unjust. I'm here to tell you that that's not true. Having studied under him, being a former pupil of his for many years, I'm here to tell you that he made advances towards me and tried to take me, a young boy, as a lover.
That's allowed.
Studying under him.
That's totally fine. Yeah, not entirely.
Yes, it is.
I was lucky enough to continue my education under other brilliant men and escape the reach of this physically and mentally abusive man. But this is not an individual who can be allowed to remain in our city where our children live with their young minds so desperate for knowledge. Socrates also claims that he's not a teacher. And it may be true that he never charged a fee, but that does not make him any less dangerous. One of the greatest things about our city is our people's creativities and willingness to listen to each other's ideas. Socrates cannot be allowed to poison the minds of our people with his words. My views on this man do not align with others in my family, as many of you know. Crito, sorry Dad. That is the reason I'm asking you guys all here today to not execute the man, but to exile Socrates. He cannot be allowed to remain in our city, and I agree that we should charge him a fine. As you guys all know, we're kind of screwed in the whole money area. And along with that, think about it this way. If you really wish to put this man to death, death doesn't scare him. What's more embarrassing to him is to talk and have nobody listen.
My fellow citizens, I am Meletus and I'm here today to prosecute Socrates. A man who corrupted the youth by tutoring members of the 30 Pericleans to hate democracy. A man who mocks religion. A man who condemns us as his inferiors. A man who denounces poets and playwrights like my father. Socrates wrongfully claims playwrights tell lies and encourage Athenians to live in a fantasy world. He insists poets only write by instinct and inspiration, not wisdom. I disagree. Yes, writers do write by inspiration, but they also require wisdom to entertain the audience. Did Homer's tragedies not make you cry? Did Aristophanes' comedies not make you laugh? Socrates asserts that an oracle of Apollo declared him the wisest of men. But how could Apollo, the master of the lyre, respect a man who disregards the arts? Socrates has expressed his belief in our gods, yet he still believes the oracle of Apollo. But how can he believe this oracle if he does not believe in Apollo? He is corrupting our children with ideas of false gods and filling their heads with disgust for our traditions. We cannot let a crazed aristocrat lead our youth down a path that does not believe in democracy. Socrates himself is not politically active. He believes that any person committed injustice could not survive. He's insulted politicians and playwrights and craftsmen. He's insulted our traditions. He has insulted you. Before Socrates causes any more harm to Athens, I implore you to prosecute and sentence to death this discourteous, disrespectful, disdainful human being.
My fellow Athenians, it is I, Thrasybulus. As you can see, I am quite uninjured, having had time to recover from my wounds. Now, I heard that Socrates is on trial today. Did you hear that?
I heard, yes.
Yeah, I heard that, but I don't really believe it. You know, I think that what's really on trial today is our democracy. And you know, I expect to hear from the defenders of Socrates that Athens and her political institutions are so flawed that this very court lacks the legitimacy to convict him. But if you listen to them, you'd probably end up thinking we don't even have the authority to try a pigeon on a charge of public defecation. What? Now, I had a lot of nice words ready to repeat the crimes of his students, Critias and Alcibiades. I actually had some really sick burns, and I was really looking forward to really getting them, but I'm going to move right past that because those statements have already been made. I think what we need to focus on here is that in Athens, as Pericles himself said, our ideas are our greatest power. And our form of government is meant to be in education degrees. So I understand, given that it may seem appalling to prosecute a man for his ideas. But let's be very clear. These ideas have the power to destroy the institutions we hold dear, and to render our young men useless for public life by teaching them to scorn our democracy. And this, my friends, is not hyperbole, it is a statement of fact. Let's just take a quick poll. Who here, excluding the Socratics, volunteered to go on our recent tribute mission? I got some heads? Yeah, okay, interesting. Now, who among the Socratics volunteered for that mission? So, I think it's very telling, this statement. I also think it's very interesting, now that we've seen the real lack of commitment for our democracy shown by Socratics, their attitude towards the gods. Now, Socrates himself claimed that his inquiries were commanded by the oracle at Delphi, and he actually intends to call as a witness to his own wisdom the god Apollo himself. Frankly, what more evidence do you need for this charge of impiety? If we believe, as Socrates and others like him tell us, that the gods approve of human actions as long as they obey the universal law of power, might is right, then what business does this god Apollo even have telling Socrates something in a campy oracular message at all? Why would he even care? Really, now that I consider it, I don't think it is Socrates' intention here to preserve his own life at all. I think he sees our jury as one big joke, and I think he enjoys the opportunity to laugh at us. So I move to make the punishment for his crimes death, and I move to find him guilty.
That we start prosecuting people for having a view that the majority of us disagrees with is the moment that our democracy dies. And so I move...
It's not what we're prosecuting for.
Well, all these speeches seem to be about all just creative ideas that everyone disagrees with, so if you have a different reason to prosecute him, maybe you should have come up and said it earlier. So I would like... Mr. Chancellor. So I would like to just speak in the support of Socrates, but more so in the support of our democracy, that our democracy is strong enough to withstand somebody who we disagree with.
My
Fellow Athenians, like many of you, I find Socrates' constant questioning annoying, but this alone is not enough for him to be silenced. If we silence him, then we risk losing the beauty in our democracy, freedom of speech. As presented, Socrates proves that the accusations made towards him are not totally true, and he is right. If we are accusing him of corrupting our youth, then where are these youth? Their parents. Wouldn't the ones most affected by this so-called corruption be here ensuring that justice is served? If those impacted by these actions do not see necessary justice served, then our job is done here. Socrates does no real harm to society, as he is not interested in ruling, as he himself admits he does not even participate in the assemblies. He and his unwashed young followers are not to be taken seriously, but yet here we are. Socrates does not even care if we sentence him to death. For all we know, he could actually be brought happiness from us sentencing him to death. In addition, finding Socrates guilty will have larger effects on this than this one man. Convicting Socrates sends the message to all Athenians that it's not okay to question the ways of our democracy. And how can we improve as a city if we are constantly silencing the people who are questioning the democracy? If Athens is a city that values free speech, then why are we trying and demand for just that, speaking freely? All upstanding Athenian men deserve to speak freely without fear of consequences. The tyrants before us made us fear our very lives for speaking against them. And if we want to move past that era in our history, we must make it clear that free speech is valued here.
Citizens of Athens, we are gathered here today to discuss the charges laid against Socrates. These charges are thus, that his teachings have corrupted our youth, and he does not believe in the gods. In relation to the first charge, I fail to see how he could have done this. How can you credit one man, other than Asada's father's son's father, with so much power? Furthermore, do we live in an age of such fear and instability within your act of questioning in order to understand our world is so abhorrent as to warrant a trial? And where does the law permit this? Moreover, what does that say about us, about this democracy? Is it so tenuous that we cannot even withstand the inquiries of an old man? As to the last charge, that he does not believe in the gods, show me one time that his supposed impiety was greater than any of yours. Remember the great plague. And then show me others executed for impiety. Until you can do this, I fail to see why Socrates should pay the greatest price for such an accusation. For it is only an accusation. Now, I have said my piece on the official charges laid against him. Let me turn to the true motives behind this outrageous charge. That those among you view Socrates as a bad citizen and a nuisance you would rather do without. To these charges I answer you. In the war against Sparta, he fought, and fought well, at the battles of Gallinium, Amphialus, and Pisidia, I can pronounce those, to defend our city, just like every other good citizen. In the case of the Ignaris disaster, he and he alone refused to break our laws and condemn those generals in a legal mass trial. And in that act, he did more to uphold Athens and her rule of law than anyone else. And the last charge, and probably the ones you find the worst of his crimes, he was a companion of Critus. But I challenge you to put yourself in his position. Would you, honestly, have stood up to the man keeping you alive? And for what? What could he have done to stop him? Furthermore, I remind you of the law we passed not so long ago that we would not prosecute those who followed the 30. Enough said. Finally, as to him being annoying, he does not force you to talk with him or to even listen. And I doubt very much that he would have the strength to force you to stay. So, if he bothers you so much, then just leave. There is no force on this earth, other than maybe marriage, that can force you to take the counsel of someone you find annoying. In conclusion, I see no crime that Socrates could have committed to justify this trial. As such, I urge you not to pollute this city with petty feelings of aggravation and dislike. Let Socrates go.
Respected men of Athens, we're here today to make a choice, and this choice will determine the fate of the wisest man in Athens and possibly Greece. Socrates has been a staple of what it means to learn in Athens for as long as most of us have been alive, using words to make the weaker argument into the stronger, while simultaneously exposing the ignorance of some of our most revered citizens. I implore you to cast your vote in the direction of acquittal. This man has done nothing but challenge the popular beliefs held by many members of our democracy. He speaks freely as any member of a democracy is allowed to do. He's never asked for pay or taken on a student. This is a man well versed in the art of philosophy, and he should not be condemned for practicing his gift any more than the cobbler or baker for practicing their arts. Simply dismissing Socrates' words out of ignorance shows an unwillingness to hear other ideas, and dismissing them out of fear, as many of this assembly hope to do, shows a fear of what these ideas can become. We cannot restrict Socrates' teachings. There is no grounds within democracy for such actions. So many of you fought for democracy against the 30. So now why do I hear cries from those same people to silence Socrates? The hypocrisy only further reinforces Socrates' ideas of rule by few, since those unfit for rule shouldn't be placed in a position to do so. My fellow citizens, mine is a plea not to return to the times of the 30 tyrants, when a man's words or actions could see him killed.
Socrates taught
Let us enter into a new democratic age where speech is not restricted, one where those given the right to assembly prove they have the common sense to use it. I propose the motion to acquit Socrates on all the charges against him. This man was sent forth by the oracle of Apollo. Clearly he is not godless or a man of other gods, as those accusers who seek to throw him in jail say. Let Socrates go free.
I motion to strike from the public record my charge against Alexandros. I'm not really sure what 1 drachma's worth, but 1,000 sounds like a pretty hefty fine. Also, my gripe is not against Alexandros himself, it's against the tribute mission, so I'll against that.
I'd like to retry him then.
On what specific charge?
On what grounds?
On what specific charge of an action?
The original is reckless endangerment,
Right,
not the
okay.
same thing. You're welcome. Thank you for your service. I wouldn't touch it.
Has Socrates committed assault? Has he committed perjury, homicide, usury? No, Socrates stands accused of impiety and corruption of the minds of the youth and being tried for simply being tried, apparently. I find it disheartening that our legal recourse has fallen so far that we can simply manufacture charges to fit crimes that we want to create against individuals with whom we have personal grudges. What does it mean to corrupt the minds of the youth? Could hard evidence be produced to corroborate this crime, or would it be purely conjecture? I suppose such a crime could open an entire Pandora's box of acts or thoughts that could be tried on entirely subjective terms before a tribunal. Perhaps corrupting the youth could be seen in a far more tangible charge of reckless endangerment. How could Socrates be recklessly endangering our youth? I know not, but I know very well how the leaders of our tribute mission could fit this charge. In fact, this charge of reckless endangerment could easily be substantiated by hard evidence in the form of probability and statistics.
What are those?
Now I consider myself a petty man.
Are you trying to charge everybody who voted in favor of the tribute mission?
What is this geo?
No, just the leaders.
Wait. As a moderately motivated individual, I believe in constant self-improvement, goal-oriented objectives, and a sheer force of will to get things done. These are Athenian traits, and they show the world why Athens sits righteously at its center. We Athenians achieved greatness not through wild bets, but through the strongest work ethic the world has ever seen. And here I stand, defending a man who believed in Athenian greatness, while in the background, a roulette wheel spins. My greatest hope being that the roll of dice favors the bold. I certainly do hope that the tribute mission's 45% chance of success proves me a squawking monotonous fool. We may sit here arguing about Socrates, what he believes and what he does not believe, but we are the ones who are on trial before the gods. For if our tribute mission beats the odds, its further success will be founded upon massacre, plunder, and enslavement of all women and children. Socrates. If Athens is the horse, then Socrates is the bothersome gadfly. He may come across brash and pompous, but we use these traits to move us forward. And so I offer this. To convict someone of a crime that has been completely manufactured out of personal spite is to convict oneself. However, to convict someone for speaking the truth is to convict democracy itself.
Yeah, so I can't agree more. I think our democracy is definitely at stake here. Fellow Athenians, as I've said before regarding passed legislation that's been very imprudent and emotional. Let us not let our emotions get the best of us. Socrates is a man who is certainly not perfect, and has irked us more than once with his insufferable attitude. But even though it has been unsettling for us, I fear to condemn him for our feelings attack the core of our democracy, and should not be strongly reconsidered in order to stay true to the principles which have made our city great. I am proudly a traditionalist, and because of this I have to say that clamping down on this man's freedom of speech, however annoying that speech has been, is incredibly dangerous and opens up a threat to us all who dare to speak our minds in our polls. Sure, say what you will about corrupting our youth and leading our people astray, but at the core, we must remember that it was his freedom that allowed him to do so. And without this freedom, our democracy fails. Let me ask you, what's next? Political centers being executed? As soon as we start to go down this road, after citizens' ideas and thoughts, we then open up something which threatens the stability of freedom of our entire city. Before taking an action as severe as condemning the man who has obeyed our laws, I ask you to consider yourselves whether you have ever had a controversial thought or a heated conversation about politics or religion. You can thank our great laws and Constitution for this. And as such, we have no choice but to grant the same rights to our fellow citizen Socrates, despite his insufferability. For we too cherish the rights and need them to continue a fair and just polis.
Fellow Athenians, it is I, Callias, again. I stand before you all today to defend the right to free speech for all Athenians. I deem that it is an Athenian virtue to gather at the agora and engage in political oratory. However, we are here today because Socrates' immediate and earlier critics disagree with his civic importance. These critics wish to silence our fellow comrade Socrates for his disapprovals of democracy and his mentorship of Critias. How can we take away the voice of one of our brightest minds? Should we simply censor someone because they do not agree with the status quo? I believe that's undemocratic. Let me remind you, members of the assembly, you allowed foreigners, medics, and slaves the right to citizenship and the right to vote. If we censor certain educated Athenian-born men that possess the knowledge of how to reestablish the greatness of our city, we then fall victim to the uncultivated beliefs of the slaves and medics. These views mirror the ignorant decision of the Sicilian expedition. We must remember the cherished era of Pericles, when all real power resided in the council and there were equal speaking rights which gave rise to public debate. It is claimed that Socrates is corrupting the young minds of Athens. This is nonsense. It is crucial for our city that is famous for wisdom and strength to continue offering different influences which are needed for this reputation. Members of the Assembly, do you think it is just to eliminate the best educational opportunities for the future of Athens? Eliminating such voices endangers the well-being and restoration of our democracy. Democracy does not function upon one opinion, but upon many. As I stated earlier, we must foster public debate and consider each citizen's special contribution to the council. While Socrates served on the council, he thought it was his duty to side on the law and justice and feared imprisonment or death. Should we convict an Athenian who sticks up for what they believe in? I presume some of you fear Socrates' teachings and ties to the 30. Although he is proficient in wordplay, such philosophies pose no threat, nor equip one to propose war and enact new taxes. I propose that the Assembly shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise or speech, or right for people to peacefully assemble. I would also like to recommend that Socrates be acquitted and pay a fine of 3,000 drachmas. This would also help with our current economic situation.
It is I, Aristogeiton. I'm a doctor, a well-educated, and well-respected member of this assembly.
You have to say you're
sure. Shut up, Alexandros. Gentlemen, we need to remain focused. Think about the actual charges that have been brought forth before Socrates.
Yeah, let's think about that.
Let's. Thank you. First, that he does not believe in the gods of our city. That seems foolish to claim, since he himself claimed that it was Apollo who spoke to him. Already covered by my fellow Socratic, but regardless.
He could have lied.
Secondly, that he corrupts the minds of the youth.
He did.
Since when was it a crime to educate our city's children?
When they go on to betray Athens.
Yeah. That accusation is based on entirely irrelevant and emotional driven issues from the Thrasybulans mainly. But the Thrasybulans especially question the dedication of the Socratics. When a mere 2 weeks ago, these followers of Thrasybulus were happy to call the Socratics their allies. Together, we pushed forward legislation expanding the citizenship of Athens. And yet, 2 weeks later, you called for the heads of those who you once called your allies.
Well, 1 week later, you didn't support our tribute mission.
We also didn't call for your death.
Why not call for your death?
Clearly, your voice wasn't teaching
If you truly search for the enemies of Athens, search no further than those who would call for the heads of their Athenian brothers.
Socrates wonders about men. What a difference a day makes. Now times that by 20, my son is now hollow, a horn of unplenty. As war waged on and our fortunes vanished, we went hungry, a city infamished. The unexamined life is not worth living, well then, a toast. I think it's time we looked at some of those we hold close. Oh, to Alexandros, ever assiduous, first of my friends, and sweet Socrates, who sits all day and wonders about men. Wisdom or cowardice do I smell in the theater tonight? Here on the right, on the wall. The Socratics must I think, be well endowed. Otherwise, I don't know how they could possibly survive on a diet so meager. Well, I think I know the true wisdom of their teacher, O to Alexandros, ever the assiduous, first of my friends, second seat Socrates, who sits all day and dreams of men. He said, education, my hands are shaking. He said, education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. I say we give Socrates something extra special. Let us send every Socratic here by trireme to battle. From the fires of education, they can here show their mettle. For if not, I have seen them peddling, wheeling. Simon supports Alexandros, then when he speaks, mock shock, reeling. Oh, to Alexandros, ever the assiduous, and sweet Socrates, who sits all day and wonders of men. Then he says, he who is not contented with what he has will not be contented by what he would like to have. Alas, they snake and weave under the flag of wisdom to raise Athens with their fire and burn our system. So few times they interrupt, preferring that we squabble, waiting to strike like the snake at the ankle when hobbled. Simon, your shoes don't protect so well. Let's think of those two things in life that don't vary. Well, only a little, for too much is just scary, inevitable. Why even bother to test it? We finished the taxes. Now all that's left is, you guessed it. They'd replace our legacy and history with noble lies and philosopher kings. And there, the unambitious, contented with simply learnings, all day they sit and gleefully cheer with shining choruses that everyone hears. Wise, pretty young men all sit in a pack. They seduce us with wisdom, their knowledge of front and the back. Like how Alexandros and Simon are always sharing a whisper, talking casually of wives and oh how they miss her. Oh to Alexandros, first of my friends, and sweet Socrates who sits all day and dreams of men. Oh to Alexandros, the general, the man, with many great deeds to his name, but only deeds for land. He has come before you as a steward of Athens, leading a perilous journey with some of his faction. But I say nay, I propose an alternate, yes, an aside, that we not ask Alexandros to die nor reside. A man of the people should row with his brothers. A man, Socrates, with the right ambitions for Athens, should be at the face of her glory. Prove it! Oh, to Alexandros, ever assiduous, first of my friends, and second sweet Socrates, who sits all day and wonders of men, Alexandros, I propose you demoted. And Socrates, risen to general, if so voted. That Athens may have her sweet justice at last, let his followers be his rowers and his damn cast. Oh, and a last thing, to be done with poetics. What will Plato's Republic really achieve, the vision so grand? The answer is, well, a little more bland. It will achieve success in wars against roughly even proportion. It will make a few rich and a few many more orphans. It will almost certainly produce no advances in science or art or bold and great leaders. We will have to wait for Alexandros to speak to ever get more theater. Because of its rigidity in this respect, as in others, it will be like Sparta, a place without luster. In spite of all the fine talk, that is all we could get. We have lived through famine and defeat in Athens, yet perhaps the best way they, the Socratics, think statesmanship can do is to simply avoid the ills that led to our ills. That the highest mark of being a senator is simply the fostering of a reasonable world. Reason? Reason? Logic? Deductive methods of rhetoric? I do not know. All I know is I have glimpsed into the face of death and war, and it is the only certainty. Reason does not belong at the center of our lives. Ultimately, reason seeks justification and not truth. There is no reason in death, only truth. And in life the same. Things outside of our control in this universe and thus are out of our comprehension. We cannot analyze if we cannot see all the parts. We must analyze. Each person, man and woman, interprets what is in front of us differently. No, the point of this life and this state is not reason but goodness. Let us live well today and tomorrow, unreasonably well.
Yeah.